At my dad's birthday party, the name tag waiting for me read, "The Disappointment." That's right, not my name, just that little punch to the gut. My stepmom let out a laugh when she saw me looking at it. "Well, it's not wrong," she said, like it was some kind of inside joke. So I stood up, gently tapped my glass with a spoon, and said loud enough for the room to hear, "I'd like to propose a toast, to the last time any of you will see me." Dad nearly choked on his drink, but the real moment of silence came when I actually left. Just turned around and walked out. Left one final time, for good. I'm a 33-year-old woman, and if you asked my dad what he thinks of me, he'd probably say I'm the biggest letdown of his life. Not because I got into trouble or broke the law, not because I'm unemployed or a terrible person, none of that. Just because I made the outrageous decision to live my life the way I wanted, instead of following the script he had planned out for me. My dad, Martin, is one of those men who needs things to be just so. He cares about order, appearances, and above all else, family loyalty, as long as that loyalty somehow serves his image. I was 10 when my parents split up. It wasn't messy, at least not on the surface. But Dad wasted no time moving on. Within a year, he'd married Cheryl, a woman who already had 2 kids from her previous marriage, Dylan and Kelsey. And that's when things really started shifting. At first, I gave it my best shot. I was just a kid who wanted her dad to be happy. I tried to be okay with the changes. Cheryl had that overly sweet, performative vibe. Always smiling way too wide in public, acting like we were one big happy blended family. She'd hug me just a little too long and say things like, "I just know you and I are going to be best friends." But behind closed doors? Her focus was clear, her kids came first, no contest. My dad, who used to be so present in my life, started fading out. Suddenly, he was showing up for them instead of me. He'd miss my soccer games but somehow never missed Dylan's. He'd forget to pick me up from school, but show up early for Kelsey's dance recitals. At first, it was little things. But then it started to snowball. By the time I was 14, I was the built-in babysitter, the one expected to do chores no one else had to worry about. I was supposed to be the mature older sister while Dylan and Kelsey got away with everything. Anytime I spoke up, my dad would let out this long, tired sigh like I was just being difficult. "They need more attention," he'd say. "You're older. Be the bigger person." Cheryl didn't even bother sugarcoating it, she'd just call me selfish straight to my face. The final nail in the coffin? My dad emptied out the savings account my mom had set aside for my college tuition. She took him to court over it and fought hard, but by then, the damage was done. I was furious, betrayed in a way I didn't even know how to process. During my senior year of high school, I barely spoke to him. When I left for college, paid for with scholarships, loans, and my own 2 hands, I came back only for the occasional holiday, and even that felt forced. Over the years, nothing really healed between us. Sure, I kept getting invited to birthdays and cookouts and holiday dinners, but it always felt like I was being sent an obligation, not an actual invitation. I could feel it, Cheryl and my dad looked at me like I was the difficult one. The ungrateful kid who refused to play along with their pretend perfect family. Meanwhile, Dylan and Kelsey were clearly the stars of the show. They could do no wrong. That brings us back to my dad's birthday party. Cheryl went all out, she threw him this massive, over-the-top party, the kind where they invite every neighbor, coworker, and distant cousin you haven't seen in a decade. I wasn't planning to go, but my aunt, one of the only people in the family who still treats me like I matter, convinced me. "Just swing by for a bit," she said. "Maybe it's different now." Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The second I walked through the door, I felt it. That same old tension, thick in the air like fog. Faces I hadn't seen in years were there, but instead of warm hugs or "how've you been," I got stiff nods and small talk that didn't include me. I spotted my dad laughing across the room with some old buddies, but the second his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered just a bit, like he was surprised I actually showed up. I already regretted being there. But then I noticed a table near the entrance with a bunch of name tags. Classic Cheryl move, she'd done it before at parties, claiming it helped people mingle. Most of the tags were straightforward. Uncle Ron. Cousin Lena. Neighbor Greg. Then I saw mine. And I just froze. It didn't just have my name. Underneath, in smaller print, someone had written, "The Disappointment." My escrigatch dropped. For a second, I thought it had to be some kind of sick joke. Maybe a cousin being stupid. Maybe a mistake. But then I heard it, Cheryl's laugh. That unmistakable, smug little chuckle. I looked up, and there she was near the bar, wine glass in hand, watching me like a cat that just knocked a vase off the table. Our eyes locked, and that satisfied little smirk spread across her face. I could feel the heat rush to my face. My pulse thudded in my ears. A few people had started to notice me standing there. Some glanced over. No one said a word, but I could feel what they were all thinking. Don't make a scene. I took a deep breath. Set the name tag back down on the table, carefully lining it up with the others like it didn't just punch a hole through my chest. For a moment, I almost laughed. Of course she'd do something like this. It was textbook Cheryl, fake sweet on the outside, mean as hell underneath. It wasn't like she flat out insulted me. Nothing you could point to and say, "Hey, that's out of line." No, Cheryl was too slick for that. It was the kind of thing that, if I reacted, I'd end up looking like the problem, overly sensitive, dramatic, you know the drill. Honestly, I should have known something like that was coming the second I stepped through the front door. This was her stage, after all. A hand landed gently on my shoulder, and I turned to see my aunt, the one person in the entire family who actually got me. Her eyebrows were knit together, and she had that tight-lipped look like she was trying not to say something she'd regret. She'd seen the name tag. Her eyes flicked toward Cheryl, then back to me. "You okay?" she asked, voice low and soft. I forced a small smile, one of those ogregatic ones you give people so they stop asking questions. "Yeah," I said. "I'm fine." But I wasn't. Not even close. I was worn down, deeply, bone-tired in a way I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just about tonight. It was years of this same crap. And the worst part? This wasn't even Cheryl's lowest blow. Not by a long shot. It was just the latest entry in her long-running campaign to remind me exactly where I stood in this picture-perfect family she'd curated. Part of me wanted to walk out right then, just turn around and leave. I probably should have. But something in me said, nope. Not this time. So instead, I straightened my back, took a slow breath, and did something they wouldn't see coming. I smiled. A real one. Easy, relaxed, like none of this had fazed me in the slightest. Then I snagged a glass of champagne off a passing tray, tapped my fingernail against the glass with a soft clink, and turned toward the room. If Cheryl was hoping for a spectacle, I figured I might as well give her one. That tiny sound, just a little tap, was enough to make a few people glance over. Not a full-blown scene, but just enough attention to make her pause mid-sip, her eyes narrowing slightly like she was trying to decode my next move. I let the silence hang for a beat too long, like maybe I was about to deliver a toast. Then I gave a tiny shake of my head and walked further into the party, letting her wonder what I was up to. She didn't get to win. Not tonight. Not like that. The party itself? Exactly what I expected. Wall-to-wall people, professionally catered food, and decor that looked like it came straight from a lifestyle magazine. Everything was pristine, carefully arranged to look effortless. Cheryl had clearly pulled out all the stops, not just for my dad's birthday, but to prove, once again, how perfect her world was. It was never about just celebrating. It was about displaying. Making sure everyone saw how admired they were, how well off, how wonderful their life looked from the outside. The real stars of the evening, of course, were her kids. Dylan and Kelsey were already holding court, like royalty at a coronation. Kelsey was surrounded by a group of family members, all hanging on her every word as she talked, loudly, about her upcoming wedding. "And of course, Dad's paying for the whole thing," she said, twirling that massive rock on her finger like it was a fidget spinner. "We wanted something elegant. You know, classic, not one of those Pinterest disasters." I nearly laughed. That was Kelsey in a nutshell, polished, always ready with the perfect soundbite, and just self-absorbed enough to keep everything orbiting around her without seeming too obvious about it. Dylan was leaning against the bar nearby, soaking up compliments from some of my dad's old friends about his great new job, which I'd bet money he hadn't earned. He never had to. Every opportunity had been handed to him on a silver platter, and every screw-up quietly swept under the rug by dear old Dad. For a split second, I considered walking over there, sliding into their little circle just to see how fast the mood would shift. But before I could move, I heard that voice. "Ah," my dad said. I turned, and there he was, cutting through the crowd with a drink in hand, his face unreadable. "I didn't think you'd actually come." I gave him a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Wouldn't miss it," I said flatly. He gave a small nod, his eyes scanning the room before settling back on me. "Heard you've been keeping busy." There it was, his classic move. Vague, neutral, not actually asking anything about my life, just tossing out something polite so it didn't look like he was completely disconnected. "Yeah," I said. "Work's good. Bought a house last year." That caught him a little off guard, his eyebrows went up just slightly. "A house?" "Yep." He took a sip of his drink but didn't follow up. Didn't ask where it was, what it looked like, nothing. And that right there? That was my dad in a nutshell. He hated hearing about my successes. Not because he didn't want me to do well, at least not outwardly, but because every step I took on my own made it harder for him to keep painting me as the screw-up daughter. He'd built this story in his head where I was the one who couldn't get it together, the one who needed his help but refused it out of pride. So every win I had, every job, every move, every damn mortgage payment, chipped away at the version of me he liked best. The one he could shake his head about at family dinners. The one he could mention with a sigh when someone asked how I was doing. He didn't like not being needed. He liked me better as the failure. I could see it on his face, he was fishing for something to say. Probably working on a little dig, something subtle enough to fly under the radar but still land its rawn. But before he could get the words out, Cheryl's voice cut through our awkward silence like a blade. "Well," she said, sliding up beside him with that sharp-toothed grin of hers, "at least she finally did something responsible." And just like that, I felt my chest tighten. The heat flared in my neck. I turned toward her, and she was practically glowing, smiling like I was her long-lost best friend. But I knew better. I'd seen that exact look more times than I could count. Cheryl was a master of the backhanded compliment. The kind of person who could look you in the eye while slicing you to pieces with a smile on her face. "And if you got mad? Well, you were the sensitive one." She was just kidding. "You needed to lighten up." I should have walked away. Should have taken a deep breath, let it slide, and found the nearest exit. But I didn't. Because something about this night, this whole phony setup, had finally pushed me past the edge. Maybe it was the name tag. Maybe it was how my dad barely acknowledged me before defaulting to his usual brush-off routine. Or maybe it was the whole damn room, filled with people who looked like family on paper but had never actually felt like mine. Whatever it was, I'd had enough. I turned to her and tilted my head just a bit, keeping my voice light and casual. "You know, I wasn't going to say anything," I said, letting the words hang for a beat. "But I have to ask, whose idea was the name tag?" There it was. That flicker in her eyes. It came and went in a flash, but I caught it. She gave a laugh, all airy and dismissive. "Oh, come on," she said. "You always take things so personally." "It was just a joke." I nodded slowly. "Right. Hilarious." She shrugged like it was nothing, taking a lazy sip of her wine. You know, if you didn't spend so much time being angry, maybe you'd. I held up a finger to stop her. Calm, measured. Actually, I said, still smiling, you're right. Her smile twitched. About what? About the joke, I said, turning slightly and lifting my champagne glass. Because it reminded me, I've got one too. That threw her off. She blinked. My dad shifted beside her, clearly starting to feel the change in the air. Then I smiled. A slow, easy smile. I'd like to make a toast. The room started to quiet. Not immediately, but gradually, like a wave pulling back from the shore. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Curious eyes found me. Because everyone loves a toast. Especially when it comes out of nowhere. I felt my dad tense up beside me. Cheryl let out a short, nervous laugh and shifted her weight, trying to act like this wasn't anything unusual. Oh, come on. You don't have to. I raised my hand, still smiling. No, really. I insist. Now the silence was building. A hum of anticipation rippled through the room. People leaned in, drinks in hand, expecting something light and charming, maybe a funny story or a sweet memory. They had no idea what was coming. Cheryl was still wearing that party host smile, but the corners were strained now. She was clinging to the idea that I was the same old me, the girl who'd swallow her pride, let things go, and try not to ruin the evening. But my dad? He knew better. He knew this wasn't going to be polite. For the first time that night, he looked at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. And he knew. I let the silence stretch just a little longer, let the tension settle like dust, before I raised my glass. To my father, I began, voice steady, almost casual. And to Cheryl, of course. Because without them, I wouldn't have learned one of the most important lessons of my life. I paused and took a small sip of champagne. Cheryl gave a tight little laugh, trying to keep it light. Oh boy, here we go, she said. A few guests chuckled along, assuming I was about to poke fun at myself. The room still thought this was banter, like I'd deliver the usual self-deprecating line and smooth things over. I smiled gently. No, really. I mean it. I think the people who challenge us the most are the ones who teach us the most, don't you think? I turned to face my dad. Dad, you used to tell me that family is supposed to lift each other up. That we should celebrate each other's wins, support one another, be proud of what we accomplish. He swallowed hard. His knuckles went white around the base of his glass. He didn't like where this was heading. I believed that, once, I said. I really did. But at some point, I learned something else. The room was almost dead silent now. Cheryl's fingers were clenched so tightly around her wine glass, I was half waiting for it to crack in her hand. I set my own glass down gently on the table beside me. I learned that support, real support, only exists when you fit into someone's idea of who you should be. That as long as you play your part, whether that's the golden child or the black sheep, they're happy to keep you right there. I let out a slow breath and shook my head. But the second you stop playing along? That's when the masks come off. You could feel the shift in the room now, people shifting in place, whispering to each other, unsure of how to react. Kelsey was glancing at our dad, waiting for him to set the tone. Dylan was smirking like this was just another round of family drama to enjoy with a drink in hand. And Cheryl was still smiling, but her grip said otherwise. I used to think that if I just worked harder, if I kept trying to prove myself, that eventually you'd see me for who I really am, I said, my voice dropping just a bit. That you'd be proud. That you'd care. I saw Cheryl open her mouth, probably to shut me down, but I wasn't done. I turned fully to my father. But the truth is, I was never supposed to succeed, was I? For a brief second, something shifted in his expression. A flicker of guilt, maybe. Or recognition. And then it was gone. I let the moment sit there between us. No rush. No drama. just the truth finally said out loud. I took a breath and rolled my shoulders back. But the thing is, I did it. I built a life of my own. One that doesn't revolve around this family, or their opinions, or their approval. And let me tell you something, it's the most peaceful and fulfilling thing I've ever known. I could feel the curiosity ripple through the room. People were starting to wonder. Doubts forming on their faces. Because they didn't understand what I was talking about. They didn't know the real story. They'd only ever heard their version of me, the one carefully shaped and delivered by my dad and Cheryl over the years. Cheryl tried to laugh it off, voice a little too high and forced. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. It's just a name tag. I turned and looked her right in the eyes. Calm. Clear. You're right, I said smoothly. It is just a name tag. I let that hang there for a beat, then added, but it's also a pattern. Her smile faltered, just a little. It's been a lifetime of moments just like this. Little digs. Little jokes. Subtle reminders that no matter what I do, in your eyes, I'll always be the disappointment. That's when my dad finally stepped in, his voice low but sharp. That's enough. I met his gaze, steady. Yeah, I said. I agree. It is. And before anyone could react, I picked up my glass one more time. Raised it slightly, just enough for everyone to catch the movement. To the last time you'll ever see me. The room went still. That kind of silence that drops hard and fast, heavy as a rock. My dad stiffened. Cheryl's mouth fell open for a second before she snapped it shut, clearly scrambling for control. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Wait, what?" I didn't say another word. I set the glass down gently on the table beside me, turned around, and walked straight for the door. I could feel the eyes on me. The weight of every stare, every panicked thought. Because this wasn't like the other times. This wasn't a flared-up argument or a dramatic exit I'd regret and undo with a phone call. This was real. Final. Just before stepping outside, I looked back one last time, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was storming off from a fight. I felt like I was walking toward something. Toward freedom. Toward peace. Toward the life I had quietly been building for years, far away from the noise, the manipulation, and the emotional games. The air outside was cool against my skin as I stepped out. I took a deep breath. In and out. It was over. I'd finally done what I should have done a long time ago. No more pretending. No more trying to twist myself into someone else's version of acceptable. No more chasing after the approval of people who only loved me when I fit their mold. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no calls, just the sound of the road and this incredible lightness in my chest. Like a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying had finally lifted. But even when I got home, back in my quiet, warm living room, I couldn't help but sit with the question, did I go too far? Had I crossed a line? Been too harsh? Too public? The days that followed were a blur of texts I didn't answer, calls I ignored. I didn't even look at social media. I already knew it'd be a minefield of side conversations and passive-aggressive posts. I'd walked out of my dad's birthday like it was a stage, and not everyone appreciated the performance. Group chat was blowing up. People wanted answers, explanations, drama. I stayed silent. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure I could handle the backlash just yet. Then, finally, a message from my aunt popped up. You okay? She was the only one who asked without judgment. Who actually cared how I was doing, not just what I had done. I didn't know what to say. I was okay. More than okay, in some ways. But I was also uncertain. Worn out. I texted her back, I just need some time. She didn't push. She understood. The next morning, my dad called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Where are you? He asked, voice cold and clipped, like always. Like disappointment was built into his tone, no matter what. I'm at home, I said. And I'm not coming back. The silence on the other end said everything. You can't just leave like this, he said finally. This family, we stick together. I didn't even hesitate. Not if sticking together means pretending to be someone I'm not. Not anymore. That was the last time we spoke. Weeks went by. I skipped every family event. Birthdays. Weddings. All of it. Word got around, and the reactions were predictable. I heard through mutual contacts that my dad was hurt. Cheryl was furious. Kelsey and Dylan were disappointed in me for making a scene. But the thing is, none of it got to me. Because for the first time in my life, I felt like me. I wasn't happy about cutting ties, not exactly, but I felt something better. I felt peace. I was still working. Still thriving. Still moving forward. And while the silence from the family was loud, it was also honest. There was no more pretending. No more playing the role they cast me in. I haven't spoken to any of them since that night. And now here I am, asking the question out loud, am I the loser? Was I wrong for walking out like that? For making the toast? For cutting them all off so cleanly? Did I take it too far, or was it time? I know I'll never be the daughter my dad wanted. I've made peace with that. But lately I've been wondering, maybe I don't have to be.